Thank you. Sustainable practices in Polish and global filmmaking. This is the part of our green screen international lecture series, which we have. This event is organized by GEM, Green Education in Media Project, which help us teachers, but also students and filmmakers learn about green practices and take action in our work. So thank you very much for joining us. Today we will talk about how the film industry can become more sustainable. This is our main leading topic of, I think, each of the meeting. This means making films in way that maybe are better for environment, fairer, more fair for workers, and mindful of legal rules. And we will share some information among us. And a quick note before we start, because as you saw, this session is recorded to create our teaching materials. We also have the transcription, yes, and after presentation, we will have also the time for your questions. So please feel free to join the discussion. But at the beginning, I would like to introduce our speakers and moderators for today. And the first speaker will be Filip Kuczmarski. Filip is a member of Lodz Film Commission in Poland. He graduates the film school in Łódź. He has worked on many film projects and noticed problems with working conditions in the Polish film industry. This led him to research these issues for his bachelor thesis, and Filip now works on the Academy of Sustainable Audiovisual Production, a project which is founded by the European Union National Recovery Plan. Today he will talk about legal rules for filmmaking in Poland, such as working hours, overtime, and rest periods, and how these affect the industry. Then we will go to the presentation of Jack Shelbourne from United Kingdom. Jack is a cinematographer and senior lecturer at the University of Lincoln. He worked on Mindset in 2022, which won Best UK feature film at the Manchester International Film Festival. Jack is also doing a PhD in sustainable cinematography. His research focus on the environment effects of cinematography and how to make it greener. He's wondering, we will see. And today he will talk about how filmmaking impacts to the environment and how the industry can become more sustainable. And the last but not least, Monika Głowacka from Poland. Monika is a Deputy Director of the Polish Creative Industries Development Center in Poland. She has worked in the film industry since 2007, and she helped create green guidelines for the audiovisual industry in Poland. She also leads projects and trainings about the green production. And what is very important for us, she was also a jury member for the Climate Film Award at the Polish Film Festival. And today Monika will share tools and tips for making film and TV production more environmentally friendly. And those are our speakers. And with Goran Pavlic, we will moderate the discussion. Goran is from Academy of Dramatic Art in Zagreb. He's an expert in film education and will help guide today's session as a moderator. And I'm from National Film School in Łódź, Lodz Polish Film School. And I'm interested in film project management and passionate with making the creative industry also more sustainable. So with such experienced speakers, we are very excited with Goran for the presentation and discussion ahead. And let's begin with our first speaker Filip Kuczmarski, who will talk about legal rules for sustainable filmmaking in Poland. Filip, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you so much for the invitation and for this introduction. I'm really glad to be here and to talk about my research for a while. I will launch my presentation and let me know if it already works. All right. So, as it was mentioned, I was working in the production department in the quite a few film production in here in Poland in Łódź, and I realized that working conditions in Poland are have some problem and they are struggling with some aspects about these working conditions, and it led me to go through these topics, to do some research, and to write my bachelor's degrees, my thesis about those aspects. And I would like to share with you some of my thoughts and some of the numbers and research that I found during that process. The first thing I want to say a little bit about the historical background here in Poland to introduce you why we are here. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989 to the establishment of Polish Film Institute in 2005, there was the time in our history here in Poland that there was really limited funds of funds to funds for film industry in Poland. So there was too little money for films, and we couldn't provide the filmmakers to have like stable job and stable income. So it was really difficult 15-16 years for the whole industry, and they have really struggled with finding enough job to provide for the families. So after the establishment of Polish Film Institute in 2005, the situation got a lot better, and now we live in the prosperity. So the year by year, more and more films are shot here in Poland. I think that quick background shows why we are talking about the conditions, the working conditions now. It is not topic that was discussed for last decades like it happened in the other countries, because we were struggling to have like enough films, enough funds for the industry. So where people had to decide if they want to work on the sustainable environment and sustainable conditions, or they will not have like job in the film industry at all. They decide to work at anything, because it's like this basic hierarchy of needs. If there is no job, there is no discussion about working conditions. So this is the topic that appeared really just a few years ago in the Polish industry. So these conditions I split into like these three aspects: the overtime during shooting, the breaks, and the working days in the Polish film industry. Those numbers are based on my collaboration with Polish Film the Film Workers Union that was established in 2021, and they made research and asked the Polish film workers about the overtime, about the breaks, and about the working days, in general about the condition they work in. And the results were quite shocking, and I experienced it on my own. And I think when I speak with people who work in the industry, it really looks like that in the real life here in Poland, that the overtime is something really common. The people who are asked about this overtime, more than the 70% of them answered that the overtime happens always or most of the times. And this overtime is not mostly only 1 hour. It's in the average 2 to 3 overtime hours. And it's the same when we look at the commercial, the same when we look at the feature film production and the series. There are a little bit of moves there in the numbers, but they are not essential. And the departments that are the most exposed to those overtime are the production, costume, and the set designers, the art department, because they most likely need to be even a few hours before the official start of the shooting, and sometimes few hours after the official end of the shooting day. So they are the most they most likely work the longest time. The breaks are separate. They are split into the daily and weekly breaks, which should look like the daily breaks should be 11 hours after the working days, and the weekly should be like 35 hours, which is constantly just they're just breaking these breaks and not providing them to the Polish film workers. And more than 89% of the asked people who work in the Polish film industry, they answered that they work 7 days in a row. So in the typical week, they don't have established one day of the break in the shooting, in the production time. And even they are the 68% of the people who were asked in this study, they answered that they work in the holiday, who are in Polish law set as the free of work. So the working days, which includes the holidays, the Sundays, basically the weekends, are also said to be the typical working day, even the shooting days when there's like scenes are shot. So I also checked the impact that it might have on our health, the health of the people who work in this industry. Like this tiredness, of course, can lead to the reduction to ability to focus and higher possibility of accident. And also this tiredness leads to decreasing ability to creative thinking. So it's not only the problem of individuals, it's also problem of the artistic aspects of the movie. So we have to think about that also from this artistic performance perspective. Of course, this work-life balance in the Polish film industry is quite difficult and hard to maintain, and also this leads to the more frequent medical visits and the predisposition for addiction. This is just the titles that I want to talk about in this really short form, but I have, of course, the sources of this studies, the sources of this information. So at the end, I can, of course, in anybody who is more interested in searching deeply in that, send those sources of those informations. But the numbers are quite shocking and terrifying. And as I was doing this research, I found that there's like two groups of reasons. One is the type of contracts that we have in our industry in Poland, the type of the legal source, and the second is the preparation time and in general money. So I will start with these contracts that we have here in Poland, because the most common is in general in Poland, the type of employment is the contracts of employment, sometimes the contracts of work and the contracts of mandate. But in Polish film industry, the most common is business to business relationship and the contracts of work, which is not regulated from the perspective I talked in the previous screen, because the civil code, which is the source of the contracts of employment and contracts of mandate, does not regulate the time of the work, does not regulate the obligatory breaks and those aspects. So it's pretty much regulated by the market itself. So the law is not protecting those people, like the producers, the people who are hiring. They're not obliged to provide some certain conditions. So this is one of the biggest reasons why it looks like that, because nobody tells how it should look like. So we go as far with these conditions as we can. And it is connected, of course, with the money, because in Poland still we are struggling with not enough funds for the Polish movies. So we are just squishing that shooting time, shooting days as much as we can. So we put a lot of scenes in one shooting day. We put a lot of quite big script in 25, 28 shooting days, which if you look at that, it's probably not possible to do this in a sustainable conditions, to work 5 or 6 days a week for maximum 12 hours. So they are accumulating too much work in a single shooting day. There are limited access to certain locations, or the actor cannot stay for one more day. So they are going for this overtime, and this circle just ends, because no more money leads to that we cannot afford one more shooting day to work in the more sustainable conditions. And as I said, just 4 years, 4 years ago, the Polish Union Filmmakers Union was established. And with this information that I start with, that it's really young union. Like in the other countries, in the Western countries, the unions in the film industry works for decades. So they could establish some regulation and they could establish the regulation that already work and have place in their legacy. We are just in the beginning of this road, and the biggest like the point that we want to provide is this just limitation, and to work in the sustainable like working conditions. So we would like to limit the overtime hours, like 2 per days and maximum 5 per week, to provide this rest after the day, a working day, to 11 hours, rest after the week of work to 35 hours, and to set the Sundays and the holidays to be free from work. And as you can see, it's not super extraordinary points that we want to live with like high life, earn a lot and work nothing. It's not like that. From my perspective, it's really basic like human rights, right to the rest, right to it pretty much comes to right to the rest. So it's really basic, but this is what we are struggling with. This is what we are actually fighting with, like the representatives of the Film Workers Union here in Poland are dealing. And here are I will switch that to here maybe. I was also looking at other countries that have strong unions working there for last decades, and they provided a lot of documents, like official documents, which were the agreement between those unions and some producers association. And on these lines, they set this agreement to set some rights, to set some conditions that has to be for example, put in the contract, so everybody has to stay to that. It's not on the legal aspect like the acts or in the government rules. It's more like this agreement between those two groups of people who want to live who want to make movies, which is really important, but they want also to have their life, their private life, time for hobbies, time for family, and just live in the sustainable way between working in the movies and their private life. So these three countries, the France, Great Britain, and Germany, with their agreements, are the aim that are the countries that we're aiming in, and we want to follow with these agreements because they're really great, like role model for us, and a lot of solutions we want to implement for Polish market, for Polish implement, but it needs to take a time. It has to. We need to go through a lot of debates, a lot of talk, and it just needs time. It will happen in probably next few years, which I'm really glad about, and I'm really looking forward to change it, because for now it's really hard to work in the film industry, to stay sustainable in these basic rights, to have good sleep, to have good rest between working days. So I'm really looking forward for that. And that would be it for my presentation, and just like the quick resume of my research that I've done. If you are interested more in that, I would really like to send you some like sources that I was searching for, or my bachelor's thesis, which contains most of these informations. And thank you for your attention and for having me here.
Thank you, Philip. This was a very, very informative presentation that you provided. Now I open the floor for any kind of questions or commentaries or comments from the audience. I guess there are many issues that many film producers share along the European continent, which tackle these pretty sensitive issues of working conditions and, right as you said, right to rest and to have some like basic whatever physiological dynamics that enables you to be productive and creative and not just kind of small peg in a wheel or something.
Yes, as you said, it's very difficult and very delicate topic, because we don't want to do the situation that we will like cut day to 10 hours and provide a lot of free working day, not working days, and it will lead that the budget will go so up that the producer will not be able to do the movies, because it's nonsense. So it has to be like the really good collaboration between the unions, between the representatives of the crew and the producers, to do this in the sustainable way. And it's very difficult. I've been on some meetings between those two groups, and I know that both of them are really willing to find some solution to make it happen, but it's simply difficult. It's not that the one side is good, the second side is bad, and they are fighting. They are really trying to cooperate, but it's quite a big deal.
This is exactly the issue that I wanted to ask you a bit more in detail. What is the stance of Polish, let's say, educational institutions towards this kind of dynamics? Is there any kind of effort on the part of professors of film of any kind, production or directing or cinematography, to delve into these problems and to try to collaborate with the, well, with the film market, with the film production houses, with maybe legislative bodies in Poland, I don't know, on the level of the city or of the state? Are there any kind of initiatives in that direction?
I think it's very individual if they're involved in this process, but actually at least in Polish here we have the education mostly for the producers, for directors, for director of cinematography, but we don't have like this systematic education, for example, for art department, for costumes, for sound departments. The makeup artists, and these are the people who work pretty much the most. I don't want to like sound like somebody is working like putting less effort for something, but like in the numbers, working hours, these departments are working the most. So I think the production side is putting a lot of effort to like push that ideas and do something, but it's I think it's still not, it's not systematic, and it's not like education aspect is not leading here. Like everybody who is involved in the union, they are really hardworking to make a lot of meetings with producers and provide some solutions. And some individuals from the education area are really helping in that, but this is not like some statement of the school, like in general. Like, of course, we want to make everything great, but like in the numbers, in the concrete actions is set to the individuals.
Yeah, well, something like that happens, I guess, everywhere. There are different motives and intensities in different areas of film production dealing with particular issues. Are there any other questions, audience, colleagues from the project? I think Filip raised quite a lot of very interesting issues. Well, if not, we may proceed with our next presentation. Filip, thanks a lot for your very exhaustive overview of the situation in Poland. I'm sure everyone could learn something from it and maybe apply it in the dynamics in their own environment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, Gosia, sorry, and there is Dimitros, if I can read the alphabet. Yeah, wanting to pose a question. Sorry.
No, I just thanks and congratulations. Thank you. That was very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gosia?
Yes, thank you very much. And now we are going to move to Jack. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just bring up my slides. Hopefully you can all see that. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk. This is so wonderful to have something like this, a platform like this, and especially international to share these ideas. Of course, because what we're dealing with is very much an international subject. So my area of research and practice is all in cinematography. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, specifically the climate impacts of cinematography, and also starting to consider how we can develop a more sustainable future of this craft. So in 2020, the BFI released a study which found that the average tentpole film, so a major feature film, creates over 2,800 tons of CO2. Much of that is down to transport and diesel generators. If you're like me, it's quite hard sometimes when you get data like this and you need to try and picture it in some form of tangible way. We get a lot of data like this when we're dealing with sustainability, but the Hollywood Reporter helped us out by describing it as 11 one-way trips to the moon. So when you're thinking about it in that way, we can do 6 round trips to the moon, and then you get stuck there on the last one for the amount of energy created in one feature film, let alone all the additional impact by what you see on screen, how it influences people. And that's one film. There are companies out there putting billions into shows that are not even being watched by people. So that's a whole nother talk, but the impacts of cinematography in that aspect are huge. So thinking about it specifically about cinematography, sorry, how does it impact that 2,800 tons? Well, the first thing, that 51% of transport, a lot of the transportation on a film set is down to cinematography. On a tentpole film, you're going to have at least one camera truck, at least one one lighting truck, and at least one grip truck. They're probably also going to be more likely lorries. So there's a lot of equipment being moved around by these trucks. Then if you're shooting 2 cameras, which a lot of these films do, each camera is going to have an operator, a focus puller, a clapper loader, and then a camera trainee. So that's 8 people. If they're all driving individually, that's a lot of cars. Then the lighting team, you've got your gaffer, your sparks, your gaffer, your best boy, and then sometimes up to 20, 40 sparks. If they're all driving, if they're not commuting in form of public transport or shared transport, that's a lot of additional transport. So cinematography alone is impacting on that number quite heavily. And then, of course, mains energy and gas on a film set is often used by the cinematography for charging batteries, powering lights, powering laptops, powering the data wrangling servers, and various other things. It very much contributes to this quite a lot. A real key one is diesel generators. They're very rarely on a film set for any other reason than powering lights. If they're there, it's because the producer wants you to shoot your film and make it look like daylight, even though the sun's set, because that's what the schedule requires. You need high-powered, punchy lights. Diesel generators are there. You do find them on production bases or unit bases to power the Winnebagos, the food carts, and everything that you need. But really, the vast majority of the time, if there's a diesel generator, it's because the light requires it. So cinematography, I am confident in saying, is a leading contributor to global carbon emissions from their impact on individual films, contributing so heavily to that 2,800 tons of CO2. Scale that up across all of the film and TV being created, the cinematography department is a leading contributor. So that's my kind of thesis statement at this moment. So my research took me on a path where I started off exploring my own practice. I was examining why I shot the way I did, why I like shooting films a certain way. I do a lot of handheld, a lot of lighting environments rather than specific things. And I like to shoot very documentary style. A few years ago, one of my colleagues sent me an article from American Cinematographer where the writer Benjamin B was describing this art form of new naturalism. And it was very clear that what was being described fits my style of cinematography pretty much bang on. So what actually is new naturalism? It was developed by Emmanuel Luzbecki and Terence Malick when they were shooting The New World and The Tree of Life. It wasn't quite a manifesto, it was a dogma, something for them to use to control the variables on set to fuel creativity. And of course, Benjamin B wrote about it in American Cinematographer. He described it as shooting exclusively natural light by day, using existing lights in dark interiors at night, favoring backlight to create continuity between certain shots in different times and places, which is a very common technique when you're limited on lighting. You go for a backlight rather than anything else. Then they like their wide angle lenses, getting very close up to actors. It's certainly a way I like shooting. And then a few other things they mentioned, such as seeking resolution, lots of handheld, Steadicam, exploring all three dimensions of space, as well as things such as a constant desire to embrace serendipity, and also, importantly, acknowledging that all good dogmas are made to be broken, like all good rules, when it's appropriate. So the key players in new naturalism as the cinematographers, you have Emmanuel Luzbecki, Tree of Life, To the Wonder, and the film I want to highlight is The Revenant, which was shot exclusively with natural and available light. And then you also have Joshua James Richards, who shot a few films a little bit less known, but the main key one is Nomadland. Again, shot entirely with natural and available light. Both of those films won Oscars. They were celebrated at the highest possible pillar of achievement in the film industry. So by both shooting and practicing natural available light, I can combine them together and look at their techniques as practitioners. Then reflecting on myself and the work that I've done, I've shot 2 films, feature films, shot plenty of other films, but feature films which I can class as being shot around the style of new naturalism, even though when I was shooting them, I had no idea about this. One of them is How You Look at Me, released in 2019, and the other one, Mindset, which was released in 2022. How You Look at Me was shot on location in France and London. We use natural and available light. One of the main reasons why is because on the recce, when we went to this mansion in France that we're shooting in, I plugged in one light and I blew all the electrics. There was absolutely no way I was going to use any lights in there, and we weren't affording a diesel generator. So I used some LED lights, but pretty much we were reliant on natural available lights, and we chose the location, or decided we could continue shooting there based on the huge windows, the type you can see in the top image, which is a great example of the kind of contrasty image we got and style we went for. Also shooting a lot around golden hour towards the end of the day in the middle image. And also the bottom image is a great example of the kind of the available light that we used. We recce'd a lot of tunnels in London, sticking a light meter out the car when we're driving around to find the right locations to film in. We did use some LEDs at times to augment things, mainly as like kind of a fill light to balance out with the sun. But just as a side note, the screenplay had no sustainability message. It wasn't that we were out to film sustainably or anything, because that was part of the film. Then Mindset, probably my most successful feature film to date. We shot entirely on location in Lincoln with a local crew. We actually shot it entirely with staff and students and recent graduates from the University of Lincoln, and used equipment from the university. So we're even more proud that it's been so successful, because it also had a cinema run alongside the award that it won. Natural light and available light was the main thing that we were going for. The bottom image out of those three was shot at 4:50 in the morning, really early, because we shot around the solstice. So we worked out it's a north-facing window. The exact moment would have the light coming in for what we wanted. So we were there really, really early, and got the shot that we needed. But I did augment with LED light. The middle shot there is a nighttime dinner scene that had to be shot with LED lights, because I needed to black out the entire environment to get the night feel, because we shot it during the middle of the day. Again, because we're shooting around the solstice, there's barely a dark moment really the whole time. So we were forced to do that in places. But the screenplay did have a sustainable message. So that's something that's an interesting side note. I'd started at this point to kind of start shooting this method, because it actually worked for the screenplay as well. It reflected the message within the film. So my core principles that have developed in my shooting, which happen to coincide with new naturalism, is the natural and available light, handheld camera work, guerrilla tactics, and utilizing what's there on the day, and most importantly, working with and not against the environment. That's always been one of my key principles when lighting and working as a cinematographer. And I don't mean that exclusively in the sense of environment being sustainable, though that is where I am now. I just meant that instead of spending my whole time trying to fight what's happening, I embraced it, went with it, allowed actors freedom to work, was quick at setting up and getting to shooting. Directors, producers, assistant directors like that, I got more work. So that's what I developed. But in the end, all of these became my creative restraints, my artistic limitations. They're all things that even when I started to become more successful, I still imposed them on myself, because they were my comfort zone. Being limited like this fueled my creativity, and I wanted to embrace that. So how does that completely combine with my research? How does my practice combine with my research and into sustainability? Well, looking at what Payson and Strobe have written in their new book, The Filmmaker's Guide to Creatively Embracing Restraints, sometimes a limitation doesn't just create a new technology or advancement. Sometimes what it does is help a filmmaker create a style that becomes their signature, an aesthetic that helps define who they are artistically. That's exactly what happened. Limitations like I blew all of the power in that house meant we can't shoot with high-powered lights. That's suddenly become a limitation that has fueled my artistic signature as a filmmaker. Combine that with what Hjort said, that the twin factors of limiting resources and consistent emphasis on cultural, social, and political contributions of filmmaking create a fertile environment, I consent, for the emergence of sustainable filmmaking practices. So combining that of artistic limitations, using what's there, it does naturally create a sustainable environment. So it is possible, as my final kind of thesis statement, building upon that, or my thesis statement, as I should say, it is possible to make a commercially viable and industry celebrated films featuring sustainable cinematography at its core via the style of new naturalism, with The Revenant winning an Oscar, Nomadland winning an Oscar, and Mindset winning Best UK Feature Film at the Manchester International Film Festival. Not quite an Oscar, but we did get a 4-star review in The Guardian and it's the same 4-star reviewer as Peter Bradshaw, who gave Oppenheimer 4 stars. So I like to think we would have won an Oscar if we were nominated, but never mind. But it just goes to show that it is possible not just to be making low-budget films, it's possible to make something that audiences will watch and the industry will celebrate using the style of new naturalism. So putting this into practice, where I'm moving to next, I've created an experiment, and I'm going to be conducting as part of my PhD. I created a proof of concept to gain some funding, which I did get, which is wonderful. I've set up a 3-point lighting setup, once using a traditional lighting setup with 3 dado lights, and once using a single light, but I've bounced that around using reflectors. So I'm very interested in natural light, but also how you can bounce that around, and also bounce around a single light to make multiple setups, when if you have to use a light, how can I maximize only using one light for a setup? When doing this, I managed to create a successful match in the kind of the style of lighting. So the top left, hopefully that's correct as you're looking at it, is the 3-point lighting setup, and on the top right is using the reflectors with a single light. The top is a log, so as it comes out the camera, and the bottom is slightly color graded, just using a very basic Arri Alexa LUT, just to give it a kind of a nice image. Interestingly, this brought up another discussion, which is kind of a side discussion, that the reflected one actually is more aesthetically pleasing. That's a whole other debate, but it's quite nice to see that it's not, I'm not just talking about a kind of a sustainable thing here. But where this gets interesting is when we look at the false color. So the thing I'm trying to show is how I can expose the same image and give cinematographers an option to shoot this way, knowing they can achieve the same style of image. So if you're not experienced with it, this is a false color reading. The colors correspond to different light levels on the image, and I'm matching up and able to get quite a similar image using the 2 lighting techniques. And interestingly, the bottom left shows that we're getting a bit of hot spotting, that red on the cheek, from the 3-point lighting, because we've got a direct light on our subject, so it naturally will be a bit hotter. Where this goes in the future and the next step, so my proof of concept shows I can match the setup and match the exposure. So what I'm going to do, and I've got funding to achieve this now, is do 5 setups, one with traditional 150 watt dado lights, because I can use dado lights as a control because I have access to them, and they're easy to scale up, working out the outputs based on the wattage. Do the 3-point lighting with 150 watts, 3-point lighting with 150 watt and reflectors, then again 3 with the 40 watt LEDs, and then once with a 40 watt LED and reflectors. And then lastly, I'm going to do it with sunlight and reflectors only. I'm going to produce a poster and also a video where hopefully you won't be able to see much of a difference visually between any of them. Not certainly from a normal audience perspective, to show that you can create the same image using the same techniques. But I'm going to use the BAFTA Albert Carbon calculator to calculate the scope 1 and the scope 2 emissions of all of those. Scope 3 is a bit of a push, though my supervisor really wants me to, but I'll consider it, but that's a lot of data to get. But I can definitely do the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, and therefore be able to present to cinematographers, here, you can shoot this standard style of shooting the same way, and also here is the mitigated impacts of doing so. It's not that these techniques are necessarily new, it's just no one has gone and recorded it in this way and presented it in this way, and that's what I'd like to do as part of the practice for my PhD. Thank you so much for listening. There's a few references if anyone is interested, and I always can email that as well if anyone would like to see that. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope I didn't talk too quick. I am aware I talk really quick.
Thank you so much. It was great. Gostia, you raised, or just clapping, and Dimitris.
Yes, because it was very practical and very interesting. And if I might share my question, because I was wondering, because this is a huge advantage, especially when I think about the education, because at our film school, we have lots of filmmakers who got used to the technology, the equipment, the tools they use. And this is a huge discussion among changing the mindset and values. I don't know, what is your reflection about it?
No, that's it. For me, there's a lot of I've written further in other places about this. There's a lot of reports that come out that talk about changing technology or just shifting to lower power lights, or changing from diesel generators to battery power units, which still need to be powered. The electricity needs to be generated somehow, and it's all good. But there's also a great opportunity for people to just embrace a different method of shooting, that by embracing those constraints, which is something the film industry's done for a very, very long time, decades. We're problem solvers. The people who work on film sets are natural problem solvers, and we have a massive problem. And instead of just thinking, well, we continue the same way, but let's just use a different type of generator and a lower powered light, let's instead rethink the kind of methodology and style of way we're shooting. Like if you want to do a shot like the one that we wanted to do with the sunlight coming through the window, let's get up at 4 o'clock, let's shoot that shot in the solstice and when the light's going to be there, and we can get it. We all had a nice break afterwards. We had a good few hours where people could kind of rest, and a few people napped, and we didn't have a particularly onerous day. We factored it into the schedule. But what we weren't doing is one of the initial ideas that the producers said was, let's scaffold it up there, get a light coming through, and we can shoot whenever, because that would have been a major carbon emission that was unnecessary, when the sun will do it for us, and frankly it's better light quality than anything else anyone can produce. So I was, that's it. It is about, I'm not suggesting you're going to do it for everything. Chloe Zhao tried to do it with Marvel. She tried to shoot Eternals the same way her and Joshua James Richards shot Nomadland, and Kevin Feige was amazed to see shots that were actually shot in real environments, not green screen. But the way the producers and those people work is that they want to be able to control stuff in post-production. It's one of the problems with virtual production, and it's also one of the production problems when you suggest that budgets can be cut and smaller because of sustainability, because producers want big budgets and they want big control of post-production. So not shooting green screen stuff. So I'm not saying that we need to do it for everything, but on balance, there's a lot of films out there that you can film this way and still have the height of success, like The Revenant, like Nomadland. And so, yeah, it's about a shift in the mentality of those actually at the top of the craft, the cinematographers, rather than just let's swap out that light bulb for one that has less power, but continue the same method of working.
Thank you.
I must admit that it's really mind-opening. Like I have to really think about it a little bit more, because, as you said, it doesn't have to be the alternative for the whole industry, but it's just some approach that can be applied in quite a few production and still have quite a huge impact. So yeah, that's really interesting, and thank you for that presentation.
No problem. I'm glad it's kind of spurred it. The thoughts. That's good.
Jack, I was also impressed what you've said and what you presented today, but I was wondering where the impulse came from your side to making those productions more green, or that was the idea of the producer, or also you were cooperated with other artist departments, or it was your own initiative to make those films in that way, and testing all you were talking about today?
Yeah, so I mean the bottom line is I shoot this way and shot this way because there was no money for lights when I started. There was nothing. We scrambled. So it's similar to what Meta Short's talking about in the quote I used, because actually what she's talking about there is filmmakers in Burkina Faso and Palestine who are just using absolutely anything available to make the film, to get the shot. So it's kind of a similar kind of style, and that's developed into my comfort zone. And I actually, when I got to the point where I would be given the choice to put a whole kit list together, sometimes I'd be like, I don't want to know what I'm getting. I like just being thrown something at me and problem solving it and creating it. So that's what became my chosen artistic limitations in that way. And then when Mindset came about, Dr. Mikey Murray, who's the writer and director of it, who I work with, one of my colleagues here at Lincoln, not only were we planning on doing something that we knew had a sustainable theme, something he's big on, but also, we wanted to do it as a student engagement project, use the students. But even at that stage, I wasn't aware of the concept of new naturalism, and I wasn't aware that what I was doing was actively sustainable. We were doing it because it makes sense to work that way. The producer who suggested putting up the light up there, I said no to that because I said, we're doing it for a single shot. The sun will be up at that time. Let's just do that. We can make that work in the schedule. It's looking back, I'm using it as a case study, as a springboard for my research, as I've realized it works within the confines of sustainability. So I was reflecting on and thinking about creative restraints, and I was interested in that, thinking about my practice and how I came to enjoy shooting the way I did, and the roots of that when considering about where to go for a PhD. And then it was discovering new naturalism, and then talking further and discovering more people work in the sustainability area. I realized the knock-on effect, and I've been interested in sustainability elsewhere. It just took a while before all of a sudden I had that moment where it all clicked together, and that's where I got to 2.5 years ago and I put my PhD proposal in. I hope that answers the question.
Congratulations. Yes, it's great.
Thank you.
May I have one more question? Because I was wondering if you have any eco-friendly ideas of the post-production, because this is very, very important stage in the film producing, but lots of, problems with.
Yeah. I mean, it's not completely my area, but I work with plenty of people in it. I mean, I wish I remember where it was, but there's some great case studies of post-production houses in Scandinavia where the servers are what heats the entire environment. So rather than pumping out the hot air that comes out of all the servers just out, that's the only form of heating in the entire area, and they kind of rotate that back, and there's a lot of using the energy they produce also to power the energy that's produced in that way, use as heat energy to power other aspects. But one way you could think about impact on post-production is having kind of limitations on how much you record. One of the problems now with digital is directors hit record, then all of a sudden want to talk to actors for 10 minutes before the scene happens, and that's wasted footage that then goes and sits on a hard drive, then sits on some tape, and then just takes up power. So that's a mindset change that can happen on production. Even post-production is interesting as well, because as things move towards virtual production, post-production suddenly flips and becomes pre-production, because you're making a lot of the assets that you would have made in post-production in pre-production. But you still have places like the ARRI virtual production stage in Uxbridge. It's in London, and it's Uxbridge, but it's still in London, and they're still using generators to power it because they can't get the power from the mains grid to achieve what they need to for virtual production. So virtual production is kind of sometimes seen as like a sustainable way forward, and I'm completely disagreeing in that from everything I've seen. And so that's post-production flipped as well. Like it's still having a major impact. And like with virtual production, it's not quite your question, but the problem with virtual production is all of the executive producers are used to changing stuff in post-production, which they can in green screen. So all of a sudden they're getting everyone to rotoscope everything in virtual production to do it all in post-production. So the reason why I highlight that is because, again, it's the mindset change. A lot of post-production is what it is. It's going to be on a computer. It's going to need power. You're going to probably be in a room with no light, so no natural light because of the nature of it, so the lighting involved. But the mindset of the way the film's shot and the way it's run in post-production is the thing that needs to be focused on. And And so it kind of translates the same way that what I'm talking about mindset translates into the screenwriters. They're the ones who write that the film's gonna take place over 40 countries and it's 100 cars driving around the streets of Rome. I'm not saying that that's not a film we should be making, but they're the people who are writing this that then goes on and has the knock-on effect. So it's mindset shifts throughout the industry at different phases that's needed. Which works so well that the film I shot was called Mindset. It's very useful in that sense. I hope that answers it. It's not my main area, but I can see parallels of what I'm looking at throughout.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I was also wondering about this virtual production. It might be helpful. So, but maybe this is the idea for your habilitation, the next step. Yes. Thank you for your presentation. Okay. Do we have any other questions, maybe? Okay. Thank you very much. So, Monica, the floor is yours right now. Thank you.
I will start my presentation soon.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, just hold on because I have to start from the beginning. And usually it just sorry. That it was set. Okay, so I thank you also for inviting me here today. I had a chance to present the activities of our group, Film for Climate. But I'd like to summarize what we've already done. And I think that it will be a little bit different perspective that it was presented by Jack and Philip. So I think that it will be a nice combination of three presentations. I used to be a film commissioner, so I started in 2007 to build and to create a film commission in Lodz. So we know each other with Filip Kuczmarski pretty well. But last month I decided to change the institution, and right now, from the beginning of November, I'm in a Polish Creative Industries Development Center. Very, very difficult name, but we will be changing it also. So right now I'm responsible for not only audiovisual sector but also other sectors, and I hope that also some activities we will be implementing in the near future here in our institution. But as I have a strong knowledge, maybe not so strong, but a lot of years and experience in the audiovisual industry. I would like to share with you what we've done in the Polish industry up to now. We as a Film Commission and the Regional Film Fund are a member of the Cinematography organization. This is an organization which is gathering all the regional funds from Europe. And we are a very active film fund in the Green Group. So we also signed a manifesto dedicated to the film to changing film industry and to being more green. And that's how it started to think about the Polish industry actually, because we also saw what is going on the set, and it was pretty sometimes scary for us. So we decided also to think how to gather forces here in Poland, and that's how the Film for Climate started to act. This is a collective group, so we are not a kind of official organization in Poland. We are we are representing different entities, starting from, of course, production companies, but also freelancers, location managers, but also important industry organizations such as Polish Producers Alliance or the Association of Advertisement Producers, also the universities. We are also a member of the Polish Producers Alliance, so we are gathering there and discussing different issues there too. Now there are also film studios in our group, so we are right now having more or less 50 members, I suppose. So we started it was the end of 2020 to think about what we can do as a group and how to change the, as you said, the mentality and the mindset. We decided that, first of all, we would like to focus on the building awareness of the industry, how the film production influence on the environment, but also we wanted to create and present some tools which will be helpful to the industry and to the film crews too. So that's how it started. It was 2000. Sorry, it was 2000. I think that I missed one slide. It was 2001 when we announced.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm afraid your presentation is not switching, or maybe at least from my side.
Okay. So I think that we are on the second slide, but it's okay. So we first our activity was preparation of agreement for sustainable audiovisual production, Film for Climate, and we announced it at the most important film festival in Gdynia. So we had a chance to say about this initiative and what we are doing. We, of course, thanks to there are different entities in this collective, we can separate. We can apply for different monies from different sources and to share different parts of initiatives or tools which we wanted to prepare. So it was 2020 first. We concentrated, as you said, as you saw, we wanted to concentrate also on the education issues. So we, as a Polish Producers Alliance, created a special educational program for the beginners, but also for those who had some experience in greening the production. So the initiative called Green Audiovisual Production Laboratory was created in 2022 by the Polish Producers Alliance, and together we gained money, financial support from first the original representation of European Commission in Wrocław and then Polish Film Institute. Right now we are organizing, or Filip and Film Commission are organizing those workshops thanks to the support of the National Reconstruction Plan. So that this year the third edition is taking place. And the numbers of the green consultants, we had a chance to learn to create. It was 17 people, and the ambassadors of green audiovisual production, the 32 people had a chance to receive the certificate. Of course, we also concentrated on creation of the green guidelines, and actually started from that point. Some kind of educational tutorial too. So we are going like step by step to respond to the industry needs and what we see that it's really important. Of course, we've got good examples in Europe, but still the lobbying on a national level is important for us. We started it from the very beginning. We tried to convince the Polish Film Institute to implement some solutions dedicated to naturalization, making the film production less carbon. So we created together with the Polish film industry also the directory of eligible cost related to green film production, which is part of the cash rebate regulations. So that is why the talks with the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage and Polish Film Institute started a few years ago, but we've got a success this year because those green film production costs will be eligible from the 27th of November this year. And so yes, it's a part of the regulation dedicated to the cash rebates, but still we would like to implement some solutions in the operational programs in Polish Film Institute. So this is our also goal for next months. We as a group also concentrating on promoting the information why it's important to have the film production more green and environment neutral. So we also had a national campaign in social media. So we asked a famous Polish actor to take part in this campaign, and it had very nice effects because there were like 640,000 views of this spot. So it was pretty good effect for us too. So as you can see, we are acting on different in different areas. We also concentrated on the award because we wanted to show those productions and show mainly producers and directors who are thinking very seriously about green film production and showing that this is possible in Poland too. And that's why the Film for Climate Award has started. The first name was Climatic Film, and it was sponsored by the Electrolux company. And we are announcing it at the Gdynia Film Festival from the 2022. This year, we had on board the representation of the European Commission in Wrocław, and we changed the name of the award for the Film for Climate. And we are very happy that we still have a partner in that area too. And of course, there are much more our activities. So as you see, that there are some podcasts, there are some presentations. We are cooperating with different festivals. Also, we wanted to focus as a film commission. I show you the project we are doing right now. I'm still saying that we are doing as a film commission. So I know that. I'm in a different place, but we now
Sorry, Monica, because we still don't see any slides, but maybe it's possible that you will try to
You don't.
the full screen, and we will see the project, because it might be important that.
Maybe I'll try to. I don't know why.
Because we
okay,
maybe.
I will try do it once again. And how about now?
Yes, and try to move the slides. Yes, everything.
Okay. Sorry for that. I thought that it's working.
The description was great that we saw the slides.
Yeah, so you see that we are a group of different entities. I'm still saying that we, but there are a lot of partners who are responsible for all those activities. But we are meeting together month by month and trying to figure out what is still necessary and how to act in that area. So I also said that the Film Commission gained money for the audiovisual project, Green Laboratories, so the educational program. And yes, there are parts dedicated to script writers, so how to prepare a good script, including what you just said, so how to make from the very beginning, how to think about production from the very beginning to make it green. And also there are some communication issues, and of course also meetings with the green manager saying how to deal with different problems. So you see here what are our plans for the next future. We know that there are still a lot of things to do, but we hope that together we will finally convince the big partners like the Polish Film Institute, but also the entities like networks, so the platforms, Netflix, so the platforms, or Canal Plus, etc., to maybe to sign such kind of document as it was in Germany, and how the Green Protocol started, or the Albert also was created in a similar way. So yes, we are moving this road, but you can see that this is a Green Route initiative. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Monica, for this exhaustive overview. Now we're setting the usual questions and comments. Jack and Gosia, maybe? Or were they just clapping?
Yeah, I was clapping because it was very interesting and very descriptive. So thank you, Monica. But maybe I would like to ask you about the directions and new steps among the human rights, because it's very interesting when we discuss together about this social sustainability. I think this is the very interesting part of making greener the filmmaking. Yes.
Yes, we thought about that. So we went the road like ESG. So you know the system of certification probably for the bigger companies right now. But we've got this part dedicated to ecology, but we wanted to concentrate on the social aspects of production. So that's why the part of our new project, the part of project that will be implemented by the Lodz Film Commission is human rights rules and kind of creating a kind of guidelines for the audiovisual sector too. But we wanted also to dedicate a podcast, because we will be having some podcasts about how to act in different departments and what are the solutions which can be implemented in Poland. And one of the podcasts we would like to dedicate to the human rights too. And the third part, I think, that there will be also some information about the human rights during the laboratory program, educational program. So yes, we are thinking about that, and by the end of this year it will be announced. So yeah, not too many days for that, but Filip is doing perfect with that topic, and I think that he can say much more about that.
I confirm we work on that. So even in front of me, I have the script for this episode of our podcast that will speak with the expert about the human rights aspect, and it's cover also this aspect that I was having my presentation about, but also some about the cultural aspects, about the providing for local experts, local crew members, to encourage them to join the shooting in this certain city. So yeah, it takes place and will be, as Monika said, announced at closer to the end of the year.
And we are cooperating with the University of Łódź in that aspect, and also with the Polish Institute for Human Rights and Business.
Thank you. Any other questions, maybe from the audience or our colleagues?
I have a question. What is the stance of Ministry of Culture? Do they collaborate with you? Is this a kind of a project of national significance, or is this support only, like that's it and not very practical? Because we in Croatia, the situation is we have the Croatian Film Center, of course, but in the projects of such wide range, usually all the governmental and non-governmental instances are included in such big projects. Do you collaborate with ministry?
We are collaborating, but of course it can be much stronger than it is right now. But I think that what the ministry expects is to showing them the solutions and the concrete projects which can be implemented by the ministry. So I think that we as a group rather has to think how to not announce, but how to present it and how to discuss with the ministry. We've got a success on the ministry side, but on the other hand, we've got the Polish Film Institute, and we had some talks, but still it's really difficult. Maybe not really difficult, but it's still needs to we need to wait for their decisions. There are some movements right now there on the post of the director, so we have to wait for any decisions. But my recommendation is if you have a concrete project and you're showing what you've already done in the industry, and that the industry is seeing the problem and finding solutions, making their own steps in that area is helpful from my perspective.
That is very useful, yes. Okay, any other questions, comments, closing remarks? Now, I would like to thank everyone for participating, especially our presenters for very, very inspirational presentations. And okay, Marta, sorry, I haven't seen it. Oh, this is just clapping. I
I
can't
was just
get used to
clapping
it.
my hands. However, what I have to add that the money coming from Recovery and Resilience program are supporting a lot green transformation because one of the KPI is to contribute to the green transition. So this is money which is collected connected to the greening the film industry as well.
But there are a lot of partners which helped us with the money, and they were very engaged in what we've done. So we're really thankful for that, because without that, nobody will be working for free, and it's on the basic step. It's very crucial.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Lots of reflections about the topics you share. So thank you to the audience to being with us this time. So wish you all of you good afternoon and see you soon, I hope.
Yeah, in 14 days we have another one, the last one in this session. So I hope you'll be with us with probably three new presentations. So on the December the 3rd.
Yeah, okay. And thank you, Goran and Sophie.
I also wanted to thank you a lot for inviting me because it's a very first experience from my perspective, this kind of a presentation and talking about this aspect. So I really I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to thank you, Ms. Kotlinska, for inviting me and having that opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I think that was the first step.
Great first step.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
And bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.